Konnichiwa minasan, Puchan desu. Welcome back to Easy Anime Japanese Lesson 10, ERU verbs. If you remember our last episode, we talked about how every verb ends in one of these sounds, and the verb is conjugated differently depending on which one of these sounds it ends in. So we also talked about how we're going to make a video with one verb in it of one of these types, and then I'll teach you how to conjugate that verb, and then you can use that as an example for conjugating other verbs of that type. So if you remember our last episode where we did the ERU verb and we used miru as our example, which means to see or to look, and I showed you different ways to conjugate miru, which apply to all different ERU verbs. Today we're going to be doing ERU verbs, and we're going to use taberu, which means to eat. Like we said last time, Japanese verbs are made up of a verb stem and a suffix to make it a conjugated verb. And normally with verbs, the stem changes depending on how you conjugate it. But with ERU and ERU verbs, the stem stays the same, which makes them the easiest ones to learn. So with the ERU verbs, they follow the same rules as the ERU verbs. You just drop the ru and add the suffix to make the conjugated verb. So with other verbs like taberu, when we drop the ru, we get tabe, for taberu, that is. So once you get tabe, we're going to add the suffixes, which we're going to be teaching you, and then we can make a conjugated version of taberu. So next lesson, you're going to see how the stem changes depending on which way we conjugate the verb and everything. But this time, the ERU verbs stem don't change, so it gives you a chance to learn the suffixes, which don't change no matter which verb you're conjugating. So like we did last time, we're going to teach you the polite forms first, which you would use in any formal occasion in Japan. And you're going to use these unless you know it for sure it's okay to use a bit of an impolite one, like you're talking to like one of your best friends. So since these are super polite, these are really hard to find in anime. In fact, we only have a couple of examples, which we found in our favorite animes. So it's going to be hard to see them in anime, but we're going to Japan. So, and also if you're going to Japan and want to learn how to speak Japanese in formal occasions, you should always learn these first. So if you remember the last episode, we talked about the formal suffixes, and the formal suffixes are mas, which is present or future tense, masen, which is negative, mashita, which is past tense, and masen deshita, which is past negative. So these last ones can be used in formal and informal situations. So there is masho, which means let's do it, and tai, which means I want to do it. If you use the tabe stem, which we said a couple seconds ago, then you'll get tabemasu, which means I eat or I will eat, tabemasen, which means I don't eat, tabemashita, which means I ate, and tabemasen deshita, I did not eat. So the other two are tabemasho, let's eat, and tabetai, I want to eat. Let's look at the couple of examples we were able to find. So in this episode of Death Note, L is trying to get on Light's good side, so he suggests, let's eat some cake. But if you listen to the clip, you'll notice that he says tabemasen instead of tabemasho. So he's saying don't eat instead of let's go eat. So in Japanese, it seems a little too abrupt and a little bit rude to say, like, let's go eat. So they're kind of using a roundabout way. We'll talk about that after we finish listening to the clip.
学食でケーキ食べませんか?
So the best way to think about this roundabout in English is the expression, why don't we eat? There's still the negative don't in it, but it's not like don't eat. So it's a pretty close translation, and he says tabemasen ka, and every time you hear a negative verb followed by the verbal question mark ka, you should always think about it, why don't we do this? So listen for tabemasen ka again.
学食でケーキ食べませんか?
That's a really good thing to know, because when you're watching anime, they'll say something negative like tabemasen ka, and you'll think, oh, they're saying don't do it. Wait, why are they doing it? So it'll sound like L is saying, let's not eat cake. Nom nom nom. So that's not what they're saying. They're actually suggesting that they go eat cake, because it would make no sense if they said, we probably shouldn't eat cake. Does it anyway. So in this episode of Ao no Exorcist, they're planning a birthday party and Ray is only listing foods he wants to eat. So he gets called out on it and they use tabetai for saying you're only listing things you want to eat. Hopefully after a couple lessons, these formal translations are getting more comfortable with you using. So let's move on to more of the informal translations, which you'll hear more in anime. You can use these same tenses informally by using these suffixes. Ru, which is present future, ta, which is past tense, nai, which is negative, and nakata, which is past tense negative. Again, using the tabe stem we just learned, you come out with taberu, I eat, I will eat, tabeta, I ate, tabenai, I don't eat, and tabe nakata, I didn't eat. Let's look at some of the examples of these in action. In this episode of Death Note, Light is telling Ryuk that he will eat potato chips while writing names in his book, and he says taberu for I will eat. Listen for taberu. In this episode of Bleach, Orihime is describing a gross lunch she brought to school and asks Tatsuki if she will eat some, again using taberu for will eat. In another clip from Death Note, Light is sending L a secret message which says Shinigami eat nothing but apples, and he says tabenai for don't eat or eat nothing.
L, 知っているか? 死神はリンゴしか食べない。
So, if you notice the subtitles in that clip, it says Shinigami love apples. And the cool thing about learning Japanese is you can see when the subtitles are wrong and don't have a correct translation and just translate it differently. And that's one of the best parts about watching anime after you're learning Japanese, is you can be like, hey, the subtitles are wrong. He's actually saying this instead of this. So now we're moving on to the most useful conjugation form, which is the te form. And you might have guessed you add te to our stem to make it a command. Tabete means eat, or it could mean please eat if you add kudasai to the end of it. In this clip from Hunter x Hunter, Gon's guardian is telling Killua to eat as much as he can eat, so listen for tabete. Killua mo enyo naku takusan tabete ne. Hai. You can make the command form more rude by adding ro to the stem, tabero, which means eat in a really, really rude way. In another clip from Death Note, Light tells Ryuk to eat the core of the apple too. Listen for tabero.
ちゃんと芯まで食べろよ。
So another way to use the te form is in a series of actions. You could think of it as the and then form. I'm going to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then that. And all the actions before the last one are going to end in te to signify that it is a kind of list of actions. And this one was really, really, really confusing to me before I learned it, because it would sound like they're giving commands, but they were actually making a list of things, like what they were going to do. So they would be like tabete, mite, and so on and so on. And then at the end, you can conjugate the last verb in past tense, present tense, future tense, and so on. And the whole list becomes the tense of that last verb. In this episode of Death Note, Misa is listing the things that she wants to do on her date, and she isn't commanding Light to do these things. She's just listing the suggestions of things that she should do on their date. Listen for tabete.
二人でご飯食べて夜景見てその後がいよいよ本番って感じで
Finally, like we said in the last episode, you can add helper verbs to the end of the te form to make brand new conjugations. These are very, very helpful and useful to know. So I'm going to teach you some of them. There'll be a ton more later on, but for now we're just going to do these. The first one is te iru, which means I am in the process of doing that right now. So if I say tabete iru, I am eating right now. In this clip from Sword Art Online 2, the nurse is asking Kirito if he is eating enough. Listen for tabete iru.
ちゃんと食べてる?
And you can conjugate iru here to change the meaning of it, and iru is obviously an iru verb. In this episode of Hunter x Hunter, they're commenting that the judge is not eating anything, and to be in the process of not eating anything, you just make the iru negative to get tabete inai.
しかもメンチはまだ一口も食べていない。
ちょっと
So you might remember you can use miru from our last lesson to say, see if you can do this thing. And I remember it as try and see if you can do this, because miru means see. But if you add it to the end of tabete, you get tabete miru, which means try and eat. In this episode of Fairy Tale, the group is unsure of whether they should eat something, so they tell Lucy to try eating it first, and they say tabete miro, which is the command form of tabete miru. Listen for tabete miro.
ルーシー、先に食べてみろ。嫌です。
In this last clip from Hunter x Hunter, Gon is asking Todo if he wants to try and eat the eggs, and he is saying, why don't you try and eat the eggs? So he makes the miru negative and says tabete minai. Listen for tabete minai.
ねえ東堂さん、よかったら食べてみない？
So the last form we're going to be talking about today is the te mo i form, which means it's okay to do this thing. So tabete mo i means it's okay to eat, and tabete mo i ka asks, is it okay to eat? This is a pretty common form, so listen for it in your favorite anime, and I'm pretty sure it'll turn up a lot. So that's it for today. I know there are a lot of conjugations, but you can watch this over and over again as much as you want to, so you can review this and get a better grip of what these things are. So I hope when you're watching your favorite anime, you'll start learning these suffixes and start hearing these suffixes, so you'll kind of know what they're talking about, even if you don't know the verb, and eventually you'll be learning new verbs left and right. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, ganbate!